Alright, hello guys. Welcome to another episode of Design Theater. I'm your host, Wes. We're going to be looking at some art today. We'll be looking at Sergio Toppi. This guy he's a comic book artist. He's really well known for kind of merging this abstract style along with, a very expert level understanding of visual storytelling and anatomy. I really like his work because he combines these different elements in a very unique way. So I've got about 10 pieces, as usual, somewhere around there. Some of them are sequential, some of them are illustrations. We're just going to flip through them, check them out, see what we think about them. If you have artists in mind that you would like for me to look at, please feel free to like and subscribe and leave a comment below of another artist I should look at. So this first one right here, in the previous videos we've talked about like design theory and different elements that we can use. And typically whenever you see an artist at this level, the design thinking is pretty much on autopilot. But if we break it down, we can see that the artists typically lay down a large shape and then immediately they will contrast that against a small shape. So in design, you have large, medium, and small shapes. And what we want to do is we want to put those next to one another to contrast each of those elements, right? So you only know something so big if you can put it in relationship to something that is so small. That's how you know its relationship. That's how you know its bigness is by the smallness of something else, and vice versa, right? So the obvious element of that right here is this woman who's holding this small man in her hand, right? So we have those two elements that are contrasting against one another. But we also have different types of shapes and different types of shading and things like that that play a role in this. We see the face and we see her neck are these big white shapes. And then we also have the background, which is also another big white negative shape. This contrasts against the textured, smaller shapes that is made in the hair, as well as in the shading of the neck and the forehead. And then of course we see a lot of more shading on the hand. I really like the shading that he uses. He's using a crosshatch. He's using crosshatches diagonally, and then he's also going across horizontally to give shape to the form. We can see it here in the face too, These lines, they're generally going up in a diagonal, but then he's also got some cross contours that give it kind of a rounded shape. And then obviously we see a lot more of these cross contours in the hand, right? And the cross contours just mean that he's taken the pen and he's going one way with it, and then in order to suggest that the form is churning almost like a round kind of shape, he's got other lines that are going the other way. So we see a lot of diagonal lines, and this works really well because these diagonal lines are pointing us towards the figure, right? So we have these diagonal lines, and they're really pointing us right towards our guy here. Sorry, I'm doing this with my thumb, so it's almost like all the parts of the image are basically flowing to point to this contrast. And what's interesting is generally speaking, when you have two things this close to one another, you want to have them overlapping, because otherwise it's considered a tangent to have two things this close without them overlapping. So generally, a tangent means that you don't have any kind of depth in the image, and it draws attention to that because it's almost like two things that are about to touch. It's like when your little brother comes up to you and starts putting his finger in your face and says, "Look, I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you." I had an art teacher explain tangents that way. I think that's a good way of explaining it. It just looks awkward when you have two things like this that are not overlapping, but in this piece it works, right? Because he has this strong silhouette here of the face, and he's got it right next to this guy, and it creates a really interesting effect. And it also creates a really interesting effect with this negative shape design that's going around the figures. And then of course you have the design of the earring here, which he just goes all out in the design of ornamentation in his pieces. And that contrasts against the cleaner, bigger shapes of the face and the neck. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Yeah, he's done a lot of comic stuff. I think that's mostly what he's known for. I don't know that much about him, but I love this black and white ink sequential stuff. I just think it's great. He's got some great expressions going on. You know, you can see a pretty clear idea of what it is that's going on, even though I think this is in French. You know, he does a good job of like grouping these characters together, right, with these black shapes, while at the same time he creates enough individuality between them to where it is that you don't confuse them. You know, he's got this guy with the jacket who is, you know, his jacket is cross-hatched, which contrasts against this other guy over here whose jacket is more white and open. It's one of the covers of one of his books. I think I had this book. Yeah, I mean, just phenomenal design here. Well, let me close these out. Yeah, just really phenomenal design. You know, he's using the white of the background to really give us this strong silhouette here of the character. And the ornamentation of this front figure, along with the way that it blends into the background, you know, it gives a nice contrast to the whiteness of the background. Like we almost get this sense that the background is very bright, and it's pushing everything forward towards us. And then of course again you have this contrasting element, which is that there's so much ornamentation and there's so much going on with the textures of the bricks, with the textures of the grass and everything. And then also we have these shapes going on here on this front figure. You see all the lines and textures of this man here in the front, but then we have this contrasting, much more clear shape, which is the face, right? So all this detail, this contrast between all this detail and then this more open shape that happens here in the face is what draws our attention to the face, right? Yeah, another really cool one. I think this is probably his later work when he was way more creative with the stuff that he was doing. This is probably like his own personal work. The composition is just really cool. He uses a lot of negative shapes to draw your eye in. And again, that's how we know where to look. You know, we have this contrast to this big negative shape. And we can see this negative shape, it connects with this other character down here. Right? Typically, we would think that we would need to draw this face separately. We would need to create some sort of divide, but Sergio doesn't do that. He lets these shapes bleed into one another, and it creates this really cool effect. You know, and then we see the same thing going on here in the face. You know, he has so many different lines going in different directions in the head that it just looks like some sort of abstract pattern going on. And then if we pull back and we continue to pull back, we can see this clear silhouette that emerges, and then we see this woman up here in the top left. And again, it's another one of these situations where we have these big clean shapes of faces that contrast against all this ornamentation and this shading that goes on around the face. Just love it. So cool. All right, let me get through the rest of these so I don't take up too much of your time. There's another sequential piece. You know, he does a really good job of telling time, but also giving us enough perspective of different changing scenes that are going on here. Very cool. This one, I don't know if the resolution is not too good on this one. I apologize. Sometimes I have a hard time finding good resolution images of some of these artists. But we can see this looks like either some sort of a sketch or something. But again, we have these negative shapes that are playing off of all this detail. You know, you've got these negative shapes of the trees that are creating these silhouettes on the backgrounds that are much darker, and then you have, you know, all this detail in the grass, and then obviously the faces here. I'm not sure if this was like an unfinished piece, but you know, even though I can't zoom in because the resolution is bad, you can still see what I'm saying, the effect that he's creating by playing with this these negative space shapes, right? You know, like I said, even whenever you look at something far away, it grabs your attention, and that's what you see with all these guys that are just so good at design, right? It's another sequential piece. I love this because we get reaction shots, right? We get the man driving, and then we get the man in front. We see over his shoulder the guy driving, and we see what he sees, which is the man in front of him. And then we get this dramatic shot as he's getting closer, and as we see that the two are now in the same frame, as the car and the man are in the same frame, and they seem to be getting closer. We also see that the background is just suggested. It's just suggested with this very basic silhouette, which is great, very smart, right? He's not spending a lot of time on something that is not necessarily telling the story. So as we see these two get closer, we as the viewer get closer to the actual action. And what is the action? It's the man with the gun who's looking down the sights. Now we're closer to him. So we're seeing a closer shot of him looking down the sight of the gun, and then we see his finger resting on the trigger, and then we see the reaction from the man. So there's a progressive climax of what it is that's being shown, because we could imagine this scene the other way around, of the man in the car being very determined to hit the guy with the gun, and we could frame it that way. And we could pretty much just reverse those, but it's a really, really smart way of showing it. All right, we just got a couple more. It's another sequential shot. You know, he shows before and after, like I've talked about before in some of the storytelling episodes. You know, this is a real low resolution. Again, I apologize, but you know, he's taking the shotgun. He's got the shotgun. He's clicking it, and then we see the after effect, which is crack. We see the sound effect, and then we see the birds flying off. All right, just a few more. Another great one. Great use of black and white shapes. You know, he's suggesting, see how it is that he bleeds these white shapes into one another. You know, he's letting the almost the light of the white paper come in on top, and then we see these characters on the side. They're almost completely white, and they're just the silhouette. And then we see these other white shapes down here. There's another sequential piece. So it seems like these guys are waiting to, looks like they're waiting to rob a bank, right? Something like that. One of his paintings. Looks like some shamans. I think he does a lot of these types of these kinds of paintings. And I've got one more here. Let's see where this one is. Oh yeah, this one is awesome. God, I wish I'd found a better resolution image of this, but again, it's the same. We're going back to the same principles. You know, you have these big shapes, which is like this big white shape that is holding these medium and smaller shapes. You know, we could say that the face is a smaller shape. You know, it's a triangular shape. And then we could also say that these same triangular shapes are going on in the hands, right? As well as the um, as well as the bird, right? So we have all these triangular shapes, and they're being held by this big shape here. And then you also have, again, you have this asymmetry. You know, you have this bigger shape over here on the left, and then you have a smaller shape over here on the right. And so this gives it a really interesting asymmetry to the piece, and then it adds a lot of sense of design, a sense of epicness to it, that his work is just really well known for. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that, and please like and subscribe. If you enjoy these videos, let me know of any artists it is that you would like me to do videos of next. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of go through different painters, illustrators, different things it is that I like, and just share with you guys as much as I can. I post one of these every day at I think 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So please subscribe, hit your notification bell if you'd like to see more of these, and you guys have a good night. Take it easy.